Welcome to Play the Man Podcast, a podcast seeking to build sturdy men in a wobbly world.
Welcome back to the Play the Man Podcast. Thank you for joining us. We've got Pastor Johnson, Pastor Pennington with us today, and we are going to talk a little bit about male friendships because we just had a conference about that here. And we had a pretty solid group of guys. I think there was more than 40 or 45. Mm-hmm. And we covered, several spheres of male friendships. Friendship with God, your spouse, your children, with each other. And it was great. And if I can just say this before we get started, we had miscellaneous speakers from our church. You guys asked them to do it, and they did it. And I thought every one of them was dynamite, right? It was great, from Jonathan all the way to the end with Vic. And it was thought-provoking, and we had a lot of great conversation. So, maybe... I don't know if we want to recap anything specific, or we could maybe focus on some areas that we thought were good highlights or good takeaways. But what are your guys' thoughts from the conference, and what did you think were some of the highlights in terms of, good takeaways and maybe some practices we want to pull forward?
Yeah, I think for a lot of guys going into it, like, okay, here's the topic, here's the theme. I mean, just to kind of crack the outer shell, I think it had sort of that maybe tone of Mr. Rogers coming in, putting on his sweater and switching his sneakers is like, really? Friendship with guys, sort of this bromance kind of type thing. Yeah. But I think guys were actually at the end surprised at how helpful it was. Yeah. Yeah. I think of my conversations with Kathy and the way women talk about friendships with other women. It's very different. With men, and that doesn't mean vital friendships with men, especially as Christians, is critically important, but we see it differently than women see it.
Yeah. I think, as we were going into conference, this was something that it was on our topic list for podcasting on, before we even had the men's conference. But there were several guys who had talked about maybe we should address this at some point of, male friendships and stuff. But there is always that fear of kind of, it feels feely, and what am I getting into here? Is there going to be, any trust falls or, do I have to...
It's a little bit too tender.
Just after the bourbon tasting, we did have a trust fall and didn't build any trust. So.
Those weren't intentional, unfortunately.
But, one of the things we kind of settled on with the topic was forging, biblical friendships. And, we had the anvil kind of as the centerpiece of it, And I think that does speak to something of, I think male friendships, the way we build deep, lasting friendships tends to be, in a crucible, it's going through the fire. It's usually shoulder to shoulder, those kinds of things. But when we really, I think, have men that we, that have our backs, that we trust, that we have that deep bond with, there's usually been, we've walked through some fire together, and that might be you walked through some stuff together in college, you know what I mean? Or you were on a football team together, or you were in a platoon together, or, you were on a session together or whatever. But whatever that hard thing looked like, whatever that fire looked like, whatever you walk through together, I think that's kind of how men meld. Mm-hmm. That's how we do it.
It's a crucible.
It's a crucible, and I think that's some of the kind of the imagery we were trying to capture and go after. I think men often think we build friendships around hobbies when we actually build friendships around hard things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, whether it be hard conversations, hard things we walk through together.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can even think of our own session here, I felt like one of the first hard things we ever walked through as a session. And there was this weird moment where we kind of all looked around and were like,
We're on the same team.
We're friends. Like we're friends now. We're all on the same team. Like there's this camaraderie and love and
we just spontaneously started hugging one another.
But it's weird how you like it was. Like I think everybody felt it at once.
Yeah.
You just looked at it like
It was codifying.
Yeah. And I think that happens. But as men, we're kind of scared of that. Yeah. We're not scared of hard things, but we're scared of the vulnerability, intimacy. I mean, even saying words like intimacy, transparency,
well, just
like
knowing,
those things are just like, ugh,
Yeah.
But those are what real friendships are made of, right? Guys, where you can sit in a car together and you don't have to say a word.
Yeah.
And I think, like, going back to Kathy's conversation, with women in relationships with other women, those things are explicit and they're comfortable. And that's what the relationship is so relational in that sense. Right. Where I think with men's friendship, those things are implicit. Mm-hmm. Better left implied than, proclaimed.
Right, yeah. I don't think I've ever had another man say, "You're my best friend." I don't know that you would ever announce it, right? Like you're like, I think we're best friends. Yeah. We've only done everything together forever, But I don't think any guys would ever say.
I had two friends, and one was an engineer officer. Guy was buff. He was a weightlifter, and he used to say, "Hey Pete, I love you, man," and be like, "Okay, Dar, all right, we'll see you, Dar." And then he stopped me at one point, like he goes, "Hey Pete, I always tell you I love you. You don't say you love me back." And I'm like, Dar, don't take this the wrong way, but I just have. The other one was a pastor. Years later, he'd be like, love you. I'd be, okay, we'll see you later. He's like, you never say you love me back. And I'm like, I know. It's not that I don't love you. I just.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on the guys build bonds around doing hard things. Anytime you can say, I've done a hard thing with that guy, I think it implies like you can do another hard thing with them, and there's this implicit trust now that's just there.
Right.
Like you can just reach out, touch that person's done it with you, so you've built something that can't be taken, right until that person's not with you anymore. Like it's just there forever. I completely agree with that. Since I never served in the military, and I've had some, guy friends or whatever, but I haven't had a ton of opportunity to just do hard things, mostly at work. But I do have this concept around Christian men, and I call it protect the perimeter. And it's just, having enough knowledge and intimacy with another guy, knowing they're struggling with the same things, right? Prayer does this, right? Yeah. But just knowing that, like, if you were to picture all the men in our church and they're just standing on the perimeter of a wall, watching guard, looking out at the horizon, and what that means to me is that they're trying to be faithful to their wife and lead her spiritually, and they're trying to be patient with their children and not rile them up, but teach them things. Like these are hard. They're stupid hard. They shouldn't be, but they are. And it's all this inside stuff that we don't know if we're doing it right. We just don't know. And maybe another guy can validate that a little bit, because you can ask them what they do, and then you guys can talk about that. But just knowing there's other guys on the fence line doing it, wrestling it, meaning they're just like, they're wrestling with the right biblical principles and application. And it's going to look very different across all the families. But if they're on the wall and they're doing the same type of wrestling, that's great. That's just the knowledge of knowing there's people there. And then as you get to know people, you can become more involved with each other's lives. But I think if you're all pulling together, the pull doesn't feel like it's so much weight. Even if you're not helping each other pull your families, just knowing other people are pulling forward with their family helps you be motivated to do it with your family. Because if you see a guy fall out, you go, what? What? Get on the wall. Like, you have a duty here. And if they fall out and the guy next to the guy on the left and the right fall out, now you say, am I supposed to be here too? Is this worth pulling for? Like, I'm trying to hold this down. So I think there's a lot to, knowing that other guys are taking the Bible and the application of it as seriously as you are. Just that knowledge is valuable.
I think, as you mentioned, it's good to know that they too struggle.
Absolutely.
That it's hard, right? Because we can look down that same perimeter, or that same line on the wall and say, man, this is so easy for Mitchell. I mean, it's so easy.
Yeah.
And I just feel like I'm failing. Then you talk to Mitchell and you realize, no, it's a struggle.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're like, okay, it's a struggle for everyone. What I am called to do isn't easy.
Yeah.
So there's a part I think we see that, okay, it's a struggle, but I'm not a failure.
Yeah, and to work into that analogy, even better knowing that he's not good at it, but he's still on the wall.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Great, because that's answering the call. That's answering his callings, the many callings we all have, and I think I came from another church, and we were much more spread out physically where we lived.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't get physically near each other as often.
Yeah.
It was the worst because you didn't get that feeling of being on the wall with each other,
Right.
protecting something and leading something.
Right.
It just felt like it was in the ether. And I think when we get closer to people, we can feel the fact that we're trying to hold the line in like the way we're supposed to,
Right.
as imperfect and ugly as it is.
Yeah.
Well, I like what you said, the rope illustration of everybody pulling on the same rope and
Yeah.
how much lighter that is. And that was one of my favorite talks from the conference was Jonathan's talk, kind of based off the quote by J.C. Ryle that, friendships, they have our troubles and they double our joys,
Yeah.
And so when we have just one friend, our troubles are halved, our joys are doubled when we can share that. But in the course of a church, it's really friendships like that load gets multiplied or pushed out or, over maybe 10 or 15 guys, right?
Yeah.
And so our load becomes so much lighter, but then our joys, our successes, all of those things, it just gets multiplied in the company of men who walk with us, who love us, are going through the same things. And so I can imagine not being in a church,
Yeah.
And I would say, guys who struggle to have friends, what better place to do that in a church where there is the freedom to fail, where there is other guys who are pulling in the same direction, where you don't have to have the same hobbies to have commonality,
Right.
because you have Christ in common, and you are going to go through hard things because you're the church, and so it's that built-in crucible for real, honest friendship, and yet so many men run from it, and it's why so many men live very unfulfilled, lonely, isolated lives.
Yeah. What do you guys think about, I use this concept, I call it working on the business, meaning, most of our conversations are day-to-day things. But then this is mostly something I would do with my wife or coworkers or maybe our kids, but like sometimes you pause and you go, hey, when you said this, I thought this. Was that what you meant? When you stop to say our dynamic is weird or our dynamic got off or I actually think we can do better. When you text me this, I can just text you that and then we can figure that out faster. I like this. I've always used this concept as work on the business and don't do it all the time because it's unnatural and kind of awkward.
Yeah.
But what do you guys think about that? Do you guys ever work on the relationship where you pause and you go, hey, we need to redefine how we have this conversation or like sometimes you say something and it kind of offends me, but I get what you're doing, right? Or I get where we're headed. Do you guys ever do that in any of your relationships where you're just like, we need to work on how we have our relationship? Because sometimes it can naturally unfold, but why do that? Why organically wait for it when you can just be like, pause, let's talk this through real quick.
I mean, I can think of one immediate example that comes to mind. I had a friend that we traveled the world together, and so I called him my work wife, because we spent literally 3 months of the year on the road traveling all over the world together. And so, I was with my wife 9 months of the year. I was with him 3 months of the year. But doing that, you obviously develop a really great friendship, right? But you can get so sick of each other, especially when you're jet lagged and you're sitting in the airport lounge and you've done this 100 times, and stuff. And so, and he was the guy, he loves to, engage in conversation. He loves to like push and prod and poke and, you know, explore every nook and cranny, you know, and sometimes I'm just tired and I'm done, you know? And so we had one of these like tired moments in Tokyo one time. And so we decided ever since then that our code word was like Tokyo. So like when I was just like done, I'm like, hey, we've talked. I've enjoyed the conversation. It's over. It'd just be like Tokyo, right? And it was like Omaha, whatever.
Yeah.
Like we're done. And it was kind of a funny thing. I don't know if that's what you're getting
Yeah, it
at,
is.
but it was just
It
like,
is.
but I think you got to get to a certain point in a relationship where you kind of have the freedom, kind of like with your wife, to have those really honest things of, hey, I know I drive you nuts and I know you drive me nuts, and here's our code word so that when we're driving each other nuts, we can just call it off, you know. It's cool when you get to that in a relationship.
I feel like the most natural relationships in our life, we don't really have those because you're like naturally flowing in and out of each other's sort of dynamic, and then some of them you have to build the shorthand.
Yeah.
You have to kind of cultivate the shorthand.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like all relationships. This is the closest I've ever lived to my parents. And so I stop by their house more frequently than I ever did. And I'm developing a shorthand with checking in if it's cool to stop by or when it's not. Because like it's just a new dynamic.
Yeah.
And I don't want to like put anyone off either. And then vice versa, right? But we should be down to like visit randomly and spontaneously. But we need a shorthand for that a little bit because it's a new dynamic. Very easy and simple example, but
If you walk into your parents' yell Tokyo,
I was going to say, yeah, right.
yeah, I don't know. I just think, you know, it's hard for guys to build these relationships across each other in general.
Yeah, it is. And I think what you said, what is it, do the business or
Work on the
business, that's even hard for men.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what I shared was exactly that, where my friend with Eric, who greatly outranked me, that just became an awkward, I let the tradition kind of, it stilted the relationship. And I didn't talk to him about it because I think that would only make it worse, you know, but there was some soul searching in myself where I worked on the business, so to speak, internally. And I just said, just be his friend.
Yeah.
Just let things just be normal, you know? Yeah. Call him sir, but just be a friend. You know?
Yeah, that's a good example. Anything else specific that you thought was helpful for all of us that we took away from, you know, the conference, other encouragements, you know?
I really liked, I mean, it just, total honesty was your dad's talk. I liked the scenarios he gave.
Yeah.
I think they were very realistic. I think people looked at that and said, I mean, a couple of tables said, man, I'm living this right now. You know, it was well crafted.
Yeah.
And
He's been writing vignettes a long time.
yeah,
When he taught biblical worldview, he did a bunch of vignettes that were all like other philosophies and how to engage with them.
Yeah.
It was good and hard. So as soon as I saw the vignettes, I was like, oh boy, oh boy.
the vignette master.
Yeah, that's right. It's true, and it's a good way to put the lens on, right, and wrestle the problem.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think, you know, we have to, especially as men in the church, I think it's really important because I think it's the way God designed the church, that men are the leaders of the church and the men set a tone of the church. And we've talked this in previous podcasts, sort of the feminization of the church, you know, especially looking at the 80s and so forth. But the church, you said, Shane, that, you know, I can't imagine not being in the church. Men should yearn for that, right? Even men that maybe aren't serious about their faith. But I'm just a shout out to the men in our church now. Look for men in our church that need a friend and be that friend to them. You know, I think that's important.
Yeah. I mean, I just think of how many times a week, even like on our men's group meet, you know, that it's just someone gets on there and, hey, does anybody have a Sawzall?
Yeah,
it's like, hey, I got one, I'll bring it up. You know, and it's just like you've got 60 friends, you know, who all have different skills and abilities, and you know, and it's just like right there at your disposal. It's just like,
or even hard things. Hey, I'm moving tomorrow. Can anyone help me?
Right, yeah.
And all of a sudden, think. You're just like, wow.
right. But I just think like that just feels normal.
Yeah.
But think, what is it like for people that's not normal? You know, that you would just be like, well, I got to go buy a Sawzall. I don't know anybody, you know, that I could ask, you know, and stuff. And so, there's something about that kind of male community that's just, it's just powerful. And a lot of it manifests itself in those ways, you know, of just practically helping one another, doing shoulder to shoulder projects and stuff like that. And I think it takes time with men, you know, probably a lot longer than women to get to some of these deeper levels. And I think you got to push in and pull back, you know, and to build that comfort in a way. I mean, I feel like even our men's events are designed to do that. You know, it's like, hey, we'll get kind of serious and intimate for a moment, and then we'll pull back and let's go
drink a beer.
So it's, and I think guys have to have that, right? You know, there has to be a moment of kind of like some reprieve of the tension that comes with getting too intimate or
we're
too
going to have a
transparent.
conference on male friendships, but we're going to start by going to a bourbon distillery.
You're loosening up the crowd, you know.
Yeah. But I do think that's how we work, and I think that's fine. It's the way God made us, and we can be mindful of that, you know.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about this at the conference. Unfortunately, too, the way our culture has viewed everything from toxic masculinity, but also to the other extreme of just the feminization of the church, the feminization of men, metrosexuality, transgenderism, homosexuality, all of these things. Men are sort of, we're scared to get together for fear of looking, acting, you know, is this feminine? Is this you know, in the realm of homosexuality, you know what I mean?
Right,
like it
right.
just, we don't know. And, you know, Jonathan did a good job of talking about that as well. We look at the relationships like Jonathan and David in the scripture, and we can't help but think in our minds like that I would never do that. Like I would never have a friendship like that. Right. Like that was a little too close, you know? And so I think we are skewed a little bit because of where we're at in our moment in history. And we have to fight that and align ourselves with what is biblical friendship, and not what are we trying to distance ourselves from in the world. You know, that's hard.
Yeah. And how is our culture shaping us that is not biblical?
Yeah.
You know, I think of being in the Middle East, like Iraq and Afghanistan, and especially in Iraq. I mean, it just took American soldiers. We never got used to it, but good Iraqi friends that were just normal men.
Yeah.
To grab that hand. Huh?
Yeah.
It was not only the hand, but it was often
kiss.
Embracing. You're walking together with hands around, like you would see a husband and a wife.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And our initial thought was, a little light in the loafers, and all of a sudden you realize,
But that's illegal. So.
but that's illegal. They'd be thrown off a building, right? But I mean, culturally, that's acceptable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way it's expressed culturally.
Yeah.
But we need to be careful that our own culture isn't skewing us from a biblical perspective.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's it for today, guys. Great conversation. And we'll talk soon.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Play the Man podcast. Stay sturdy, friends.